I'd like to open this session. I can welcome you here. Good morning. From my side, I'm the chair. I'm Martin Lenk. I'm coming from the Federal Agency for Cartography and Geodesy in Germany, and I got the honor to chair this session today. The theme we are dealing with today is called Utility and Asset Management. Originally, we had two presentations foreseen for more or less this title in the context also of INSPIRE, and we also had a presentation about Smart City, or City Smart it's called here, and also about BIM. But as you can see, one of the presentations was cancelled about Smart City, Patrick Hogan, NASA. So in the end now we have three presentations, which is, makes me feel quite easy looking at all the other sessions where usually we had 5 or 6 presentations in a row. So we can relax now. It doesn't mean that we will have hours of presentations now, but we just agreed that we would basically try to do the presentations in 20 minutes. So for the next hour, more depending on the discussions, we will sit here and do our thematic session here. I'd like to start now with the first presentation from Germany, my home country, and I welcome Jeanette Hallwald. She is together here with a colleague, Mr. Plegert, both from the Federal Ministry of Interior, and your presentation will be balancing security interests and publication of utilities geoinformation by INSPIRE services. So I invite you here on the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin, for the introduction, and I'm particularly happy to stand here today to talk with my colleague Heiko Plittert about balancing security interests and publication of geoinformation coming from utilities companies by INSPIRE services, because it gives us a unique chance to work together, because he's coming from the IT security branch of the ministry, and I'm coming from the spatial information / INSPIRE branch, if you like to say so. And we found out that this is a hotly discussed topic in Germany. So it's really necessary to work together here. And we're going to try to present you some of the results of the collaboration so far. Just a short overview about the agenda of this presentation. We first want to introduce a little bit into what I think is a dilemma for some data between the open data policy and security interests. Then we will come to wrap up the legal framework that is posed in Germany and probably in most other countries as well, and then try to figure out what does that mean now for the utility sector, and to come to present you afterwards what we did to get our findings into a guidance document for the utility sector, and conclude at last. So potentials of open data, you probably all know quite a lot about that. We heard a lot of talks here the last 3 days about open data and the benefits, but just to highlight some points. The free and open access of data means to bring the administration closer to the citizens. It's really a good opportunity that the administrative data comes transparent, that the citizens see what the administration is doing and are more confident about it, and get, of course, information. how the tax money is spent. And it's also, of course, a part of the administration of, it should be the state of the art, because it enables just a transparent government and can accelerate definitely administrative processes and reduce costs. Just an estimation that can't be discussed, it's just a number, but I found in a paper that the promotion of economic development only for Germany is estimated the potential of 43.1 billion, or maybe 20,000 jobs. So at the INSPIRE directive, since it came into force in 2007, is definitely an open data pioneer. PSI directive and other law just came a lot later. So we heard now about the benefits, but we think we should, from time to time, think about the potential risks and assess if there are risks. I mean, look at the critical infrastructures. They provide basic needs for the society. It may be drinking water or electricity or gas. If it fails, and if it can have a severe impact on society, because if you don't have electricity or gas, you know, there's no heating, there's no lighting, there's no computers working, and also your smartphone is running out of power after a day probably. So we don't have to talk about any digital services anymore. And because of that, we really rely on these infrastructures, and that's why they're called critical. This is an example of which is currently discussed again in Germany, which is fire hydrants and OpenStreetMap. You see here that you can see in OpenStreetMap also the location of the fire hydrants, and you can see the nominal width, and you see the attributes, and we have to think about if that is a risk to publish it for everybody. We don't have the conclusion here now, but we have to think about it. Another example is the gas distribution network. Of course, if you know all the locations of the nodes, and we have to think, or we have to assess if it is easier to plan an attack because we publish INSPIRE services. We just have to discuss that. So the main questions are, does everybody need to know all existing data, or also may everybody know all existing data? And we have here to find a balance, and that's what it's all about. The government is responsible for on one side for the administration that is service-oriented for the citizens. They have the right to know what the administration is doing, and they need to serve the citizens. And on the other hand, the government also needs to ensure that the security of citizens is there, and there's the need to find the right balance for it. So we can have a look at the INSPIRE obligations from the INSPIRE framework, and in Article 11, the INSPIRE directive has basically a general obligation to publish INSPIRE relevant data sets by standardized services. Article 13 in the INSPIRE directive also opens up possibility that public access to the data sets and services can be limited if the access would affect international relations, public security, or national defense. So INSPIRE directive is already considering that and taking care of it. And it's on us, when we implement INSPIRE, to have a look at that and take that into consideration. So that's my colleague Heiko Pleter knows better about the IT safety of critical infrastructures, yeah. So it's on him.
Yes, hello. Yes, in Germany we think about critical infrastructures, and at the beginning we do it very small. We say in 2009, we look only at the federal Germany infrastructure and take an act to protect the federal information systems, not more. Only look on ourselves. But in July 2013, we have a heavy rainfall in the federal state Niedersachsen in Germany, and we see it has a big impact for the society and the public life, because no water, no drink water, no electricity, no gas. It was a problem also for the governmental system, because at this point we know, okay, we need for our own work infrastructure. Yes? The government also need power, water, and so on. And so we say 2015 in the act, okay, we put the critical infrastructures in the Security Act. It says security, critical infrastructures and IT systems, IT safety is very important for us. And so we see that we are not alone with this idea. You see in August 2016, the EU has made a directive with the same opinion, the NIS directive. It's the Network and Information Safety System directive. And this directive says, okay, every member state of the EU must do the same thing, protect critical infrastructures and so on. And you have a timeline of 2 years. You must do this to 2018. And we say in Germany, oh, a lucky moment for us, because we have do this in the Security Act before. And so we are implementing the EU NIS directive in this year, in June 2017. Our point of view in this BSI, the BSI is a German governmental office, is the Federal Office for Information Security. This is our main headquarter to manage this act. So it's the short name BSI. In this act you see the operators of critical infrastructures must implementing a state-of-the-art IT security. The state-of-the-art, you know it if you see it today, look every day in the news, grows up. You must every time make a preview of the state-of-the-art. And if you have an incident, a significant incident in IT security, you must make a report to the German Federal Office of Information Security, because sometimes you have only an incident in one company, okay. But if you see you have an impact in a power supply in Berlin, power supply in the federal state Niedersachsen, and so on, you see it grows up. It's perhaps a little bit more and more complicated. And to the Security Act, we does not say, okay, what was a big question, what is critical infrastructure? And so we have made some 2 audiences, and in these audiences we define the sectors which are critical. And we have in Germany 7 sectors. That is the energy, water, ICT, food, finance and insurance is the last basket, and transport and traffic, and also health. And in this ordinance baskets, you can see you have an asset categories and thresholds, so every company can look and see, oh, I'm critical, I'm not critical. And we see normally also the utility sectors in general are critical. And through the law, we have the opinion to do something for the companies. Yes? Also, the companies are critical, get early warning information from this office, get help to improve her security. And now we see in the discussion with the companies and the supplier that you must think about the open data. Yes? Because it's not easy to protect my IT landscape when all the data I can find in the internet. And the best way was yesterday, I have here something about the underground GSI model in Berlin. You see the drill holes and so on, and I asked the guy, what is the security? Because if you have a drill hole in a drink water ground, you can open it, put something in. Yes, you know it from the news. Today I say normally it's easy to take a car or a truck, but doesn't know what we do in the next few years. And the problem, he says, oh, we have limited the data. You can find the drill holes in the internet. I have yesterday in the evening a little bit time, put my OpenStreetMap app on. Look at, you find the drill holes. Yeah? That is a problem because the power supplies, the companies, can protect her infrastructure when you find special dates as open data. But transparency is important. You must find something, no problem, but we think not all. Okay.
So what does it mean now for the utility sector when we speak about INSPIRE implementation? Well, apparently, it's obvious, utility operators hold spatial data about their critical infrastructure. They have to, of course, and that might be, for instance, grid area or supply area, and the spatial data of critical infrastructure or other sensible data might, of course, be subject to INSPIRE legislation, especially in the Annex 3 themes. So we have to deal with it, with the topic, and we have to assess if they and how they can implement INSPIRE. We found out that in our work that INSPIRE relevant spatial data of critical infrastructures are to be provided in an interoperable format according to INSPIRE standards, and because in an emergency case, that's what you need for authorities coming an emergency case to help. They need this information. They just, I mean, we heard yesterday in a plenary as well, the floods don't stop at the borders, and so here you need cross-border information about where to go, not only about where the floods went, but what infrastructures are affected by the floods. And so you need both information, and you need it in an interoperable format and cross-border. So that's the main point about INSPIRE. And so that's why I think these data are, need to be in an INSPIRE format, and it's also the legislation. But the access of the INSPIRE services and data of these critical infrastructures should be limited for general public in the interest of public security. So only the authorities with legitimate interests should have access, but they need that access. A few, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, there was very helpfully the coordination office of the Geo Business Commission in Germany initiating and chairing a working group which put together people coming from the INSPIRE side and people from the IT security side, and also people from the utility sectors. And because utilities in Germany are normally operated by local authorities or by private companies. And in that working group, after a while, we found a way to come together and develop as a first step, really first step, a guidance document for providing metadata for INSPIRE relevant data sets. Yeah, the next steps. There are a lot of more steps to go, as I just mentioned. This is only really the beginning. And the current issues and questions that need to be solved is at first which concrete data of critical infrastructures are relevant for INSPIRE and that could pose a substantial risk for public security if they would be published for everyone. This is the main question, and it's not easy to answer. And also we need technical tools for authorizing that access to sensitive data, and we didn't find these tools until now. So we might have to develop them or better search for it. And of course, at the end, we need to integrate the INSPIRE services containing these sensitive data into a safe spatial data infrastructure. So that's why we developed a new working group, and Heiko Pletat knows more about it.
Yeah, some words about it. Yeah, for the security or the critical infrastructure and the Act in Germany, we see at the beginning it's not an act, it only comes from the government. We need interaction with the companies and the suppliers. And so we have in Germany a cooperative thing between the private and the public sector. We call it UP-Kritis. It's a crazy German word. I think in the next half year we have a correct word for it. It can be translated as bad German. This group is a public-private partnership. So the public and the private part sits together and talking and thinking about some parts. And in a moment we have seen from the companies and suppliers that it's important that we talked about transparency in this open data. And in this group we have in a moment, we at the beginning with this group, 3 points that we will discuss in the next few months about it, because it's very important for us. One part is to develop a standard for providing infrastructure data. It means for us, we need a standard for a filter set. So when you have in the INSPIRE metadata, the possibility to take some data as critical and so on. Yeah. And, but when you publish the data, you must block it. And so perhaps you need a standard for a filter, so that you publish your data on every site, the critical information will be blocked. The next is what we see is the accompany future regulation projects from the outset, security by design. We have today an EU directive about a cataster for railroad systems. And we're thinking about in a moment to say, okay, some parts of the railroad system in Germany is critical. How we put the security belongings and the open data belongings in this act in Germany together. Yes? And the last thing is, we see it, you have here some parts about big data. So every one of information in open data is normally not critical. But if you put together the information, the pipe, the hydrants and so on, you have perhaps some critical information. And yeah, what is our problem is we would find some examples. One is the combination of open data critical, why not? And what must we do, perhaps? Okay. Was? Yeah. Congratulations.
So yeah, just shortly in conclusions, I just saw from the chair we don't have so much time left. Just at the end, so we found that some spatial data of critical infrastructures, probably not all, but they contain sensible information, and the publishment of those information or providing them on the internet for anyone, that needs to be limited in the interest of public security. But we urgently need the access for authorities with legitimate interest to the spatial data in an interoperable format, in order that we are able to be active in crisis situations and I'm sure we need this information for some use cases that INSPIRE is designed for. And of course, we need to evaluate which data sets in the utilities sector are security sensitive and on the other hand also are INSPIRE relevant. So yeah, let's develop tools to integrate INSPIRE services of sensible data also in a safe spatial data infrastructure. Thank you for listening to us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for bringing out these problems quite clear, and I can imagine that in some other member states you are dealing with pretty much the same questions as we do in Germany. But now, first of all, I give you the possibility to ask questions. Please.
Thank you for all those discussions, and these are really problems, possible problems in the future. I would like to ask if there's any risk that you see to decide everything critical, the easiest way to. Is there an approach like that? Because the balance is very hard to establish. The hardest thing, I think, in this subject is the balance, to establish the balance. I would like to know if there is any approach to limit everything, because we are trying to increase the participation, share information, etc. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think that, as you pointed out, that really is the main issue, and we have a risk that we just say too fast. Everything that belongs to critical infrastructures can't be published, but we need to look into the concrete data sets if they are really sensible and pose a risk. So that's the main problem. But that's what I say. That's a really hard work to do.
At sometimes it's possible only make security access to the data. So the supplier sometimes only knows who looks at the data. So, and when you say not anonymous, but I'm a building a construction company and I need the information about the water pipes and so on. It says, okay, we know the person who has make question for the data. It will be okay. Or not, I think a private person, you must ask why must you need, where is the power supply station? Yeah.
Okay, before we come to the next question, I would say one more question, because even so we have a lot of time, we run out of time. So please, one short question and a brief answer.
So, sorry, it's sad that we don't have so much time, so we have a conference, I think, to make a conference about this topic. Yeah. I'm very happy that there are people who are looking at this topic, security, because there are not so many here inside this conference book. But yeah, I enjoyed it really to hear that there are people who are looking for critical data and how to use it. But you have to focus on the risk. How's your focus? Is there also a focus on the society risks? I mean, yesterday we heard the session about BMW and the big data they sampled there. It had nothing to do with INSPIRE data, but there are big data, and it's fashion to have big data, and everybody can get the infos. But have you also focus on that?
Yes, because the main opinion of the German Security Act is only the society at first. We say for the critical. Yes, we will supply the society. And so we have the same problems, yeah, we say that with big data. I was yesterday also in a BMW track. We must also think about it. It's the next big problem. I think we look at one part you open yeah, the next cases.
The thing is, you don't have, it's nice to
I'm
not
sorry.
run ahead. It's better to look before, because we are now on the point, you all know, we are now on the point to open everything.
Yeah.
But we don't have really the regulation for this. And I think we have to be faster.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so sorry now to stop the discussion. I
Well,
know
it's
you're
left
absolutely right. We could have a conference about that, but I think we should be fair to the other speakers and just make sure that everybody's got enough time. So I keep myself short now as well. That's my contribution. And just one note to all the people who came later. One of the presentations was cancelled, and that's why we changed our schedule. Everything is in a row, but we only got 3 presentations, and that means we got roughly half an hour, including discussion for the presentations, but yeah, sure, not longer. So the next presentations is extension on the data model, INSPIRE utility networks from a business point of view, from Advan Houtem, is an advisor for, I guess, Dutch Cadastre.
Good morning to you all. A nice, gender neutral welcome. These are the topics I want to discuss with you. First of all, some background information about the utility networks. Then our service to prevent damage due to excavation activities. Were some goals to be met. We did some research on that goals, and we looked at the INSPIRE directive and its influence on the utility networks information system, also the security part. And on all of this, we had some modeling and some problems with the INSPIRE data model. We mixed in to extent, and in the end, you might have some questions. First of all, the utility networks. Some statistics. There are about 1.7 million kilometers for electricity, water, gas, telecom, fossil fuels, chemicals. Mostly underground in the Netherlands. There are a few lines, electricity lines, for nostalgic reasons. And of course the high voltage lines, some of them cross-border. There are about 15,000 excavators, professionals, mainly busy with building, agriculture, and digging trenches for utility networks. There are about 1,100 network administrators, and among them are about 400 municipalities with their sewage systems. There are nearly 33,000 excavation damages last year, and that's a security reason too. There's a good reason to have a system to prevent that. And the average cost of an excavation damage is about 100 euros per piece. About half of these excavation damages are near houses, from the main network to the house. And when you damage a gas pipeline, that little piece between the main network and the house, that would be a disaster. That could be a disaster. The building could be blown up. The number of excavation damages have decreased last years, mainly due to a system we call Clique. It's an abbreviation for Cables and Pipelines Information Center. It was an initiative of the cable and pipeline owners, the administrators of cables and pipelines, which started in the north of Netherlands 1968. Because of some big accidents, the excavators and the network administrators sat together, and we in the Netherlands are used to polder. That's a kind of discussion which seems to have no ending, but in the end there was a system called Clique in the north of the Netherlands, and by 1986 it was nationwide. The principle is quite simple. A reported excavation is being transferred to the network administrators involved, and they react by sending their paper maps, in the beginning, later on, digital, to the applicant. Since in the early days, in 2008, no, a bit later, there was a severe accident in Wallonia, in Belgium. 26 people died, mainly from fireworks, etc., police officers. That was a serious accident. A high-pressure gas pipeline was damaged, and there was a reasonable big discussion in the Dutch parliament. Could that happen to us too? We've got a system called Clique, private initiative, but could it happen to us too? There was little risk, but there's also always a risk. And after these discussions, there was the Dutch government decided to have a legal act on preventing damage due to excavations. It's called WION, Act on Information Exchange for Underground Networks, which obliges the excavators to use the system called Clique, and which obliges the network administrators to cooperate with that system. Being a legal obligation, it became a public service, and now my organization, Cadastre, is running that. But in those days, in the days that the act was being made, the network administrators had some improvements on the systems, and the Cadastre had built that new system and made it operable in 2010. It is based on web services. It's a fully automated transfer to the network administrators. It's a fully automated delivery of combined maps based on the format PNG, open, transparent PNG, to the excavator, and it's rate-based. The user pays for the system. 90 euros per request, which is reasonably low. This picture is Dutch. Excavation damage, we prevented together. The industry is well satisfied with the present Clique service, but first of all, there must be some improvements. There must be the higher priority to reduce the excavation damages, a decrease on the number of them, and secondly, there must be an improvement on the efficiency of for the whole industry. Sharing information can be costly. And the last business requirement is that the information about underground infrastructure should be used in other domains in a Clique-like way. So a question and answer through the Clique system, like in planning, zoning, public order, and security. The security officer would need the information too. What are the user needs based on these goals? The system should be operable before 2020. Also, the deadline for Annex 3 from INSPIRE. The system should be ubiquitous. That's meaning 24/7, near real time, any place, anytime, any device. It should deliver sharp images while zooming in. From a user point of view, that's quite logical. An excavator also needs multiple layers for the cables and pipelines, but also for plant topography. He's working in a plant environment for new cables and pipelines, so he must know the plant topography, type of soil he is working in, cadastral boundaries, addresses, pollution. A fourth, there must be an administration of reported excavation and of the provided information in case of legal liability. What did you ask? Well, what was the place you were planning to dig in? What did you get on information? And here I link to your story. An applicant must be authenticated and reported to the administrator involved. They both want to know each other. The excavator wants to know which network administrators are involved and which contact person he is presented if he's got some questions. But the network administrator wants to know who's digging near his pipeline and what kind of work he's going to do. It's quite different if a pile is being sent to the bottom, or if a complete territory is being digged. The authorization of the information he gets is based on its profile. A governmental service could get more information than a simple contractor. Financing the system, it must remain rate-based, the user pays, and it should be based on web services, WMS, WFS. And last but not least, it must meet the requirements of INSPIRE utility networks. The industry didn't want two different systems next to each other. Now let's look at the differences between INSPIRE and Clique. Both are based on legislation. In the Netherlands we got WION, Act on Information Exchange Underground Networks, and we've got INSPIRE. It's a directive, but in the Netherlands we all like you all, have an act on that. A similarity is also that it's based on web services, WMS and WFS, but then there are some differences. There's a strict roadmap for INSPIRE, but we had some elections, and several days ago, 200 by now, and we still haven't got a new government. That's hard to change an act. So the strict roadmap we wanted to have for changing WION, we can't meet it. There's another timetable. There are, for INSPIRE, there are no strict user needs for quality of the provided information, the content. For excavation activities, it must be highly quality. Furthermore, not all networks are included in INSPIRE. The telecom business is excluded. In Clique, for digging activities, you have to have information about all networks. Now, most network operators are willing to cooperate with harvesting their data in a central data warehouse at the cadastre. Telecom business explicitly not. They do not want to hand over their total database of their network to the government, speaking of trustworthy. So for every application, application for information on a request from a contractor, we have to get the information out of the databases from KPN, one of the main telecom business, Ziggo, other, and so forth. Now, the industry is quite strict on the issue of authentication, authorization, and accounting, and they have good reasons for that. The first presentation always mentioned it, also mentioned it. INSPIRE aims at open, anonymous, free. Now that's a contradiction. Also, the currency of the currently data. INSPIRE has hardly any requirements on how current the data must be. For Excavation Act, there is need for highly current data. And last but not least, INSPIRE has no limitations on the area that can be requested. In Clique there are some limitations, about 2.5 kilometers by 2.5 kilometers. Now the consequences are that first of all, INSPIRE utility networks should be a part of Clique. There are many similarities, but it would lead by putting it together, and capturing it, it would lead to less cost for the utility networks. And it also would prevent cannibalization on Clique. If you get in one system the data for free, anonymous, and in the other system you have to pay 90 euros for a request, now the decision is easily made, and you start digging with incomplete maps, old maps, and no authority. So we would like to prevent cannibalization on Clique. And secondly, second consequence is that there should be a common information model for multiple applications on cables and pipelines. Now we're getting to the model. It was designed by Geoinformation. Paul is not present here, but he was the designer. And we worked hard on designing this model. I've understood that for extending a model, there are basically four methods: subtyping by association, application domain extension, and mixing multiple inheritance. We've chosen for the last one. It's most suitable. It's the only method which makes it possible to combine two models. And the Dutch part of the model is still recognizable. Furthermore, we are not forced into an INSPIRE model, and we remain flexible. I've looked for a definition of inheritance, and I came up with this one. See if you can understand it. Inheritance provides the class model with a means of factoring out common behavior and attributes into generalized classes that then act as the ancestor of many variations of the common theme. Anyone? Huh? Now, in my words then, a duck, a cuckoo, and an ostrich have common attributes and common behavior. And that's described in the class bird. So the bird is the ancestor. And the duck inherits the common attributes and behavior from the class bird. Its ancestor. And so does the cuckoo and the ostrich in this example. Now that's basically inheritance. Now let's look at mixing multiple inheritance. This is a part of the data model from INSPIRE on utility networks. We see the feature type electricity cable in red, which is one of the variations of the feature type cable. There are more variations on electricity cable, on cable, and electricity cable is one of them. Cable inherits from utility link set, and that inherits from utility links. So is the model made for this part. We now mix in the Dutch data model for the part that is not already described in the INSPIRE part of the model. The feature type elektriciteitskabel in little brown inherits the feature type electricity cable from the INSPIRE part. The feature type kabel of leiding is the mix-in class. It's this one. With the typical Dutch attributes and behavior. It is being mixed in the feature type elektriciteitskabel. And so we got a win-win situation. We have both, the best of both worlds. This is in the green, you see the INSPIRE utility networks base, the INSPIRE network utility networks in green. And we've combined this with the EMKL extent, the Dutch part. I will not go into this. But in the end, with the principle I've shown, this is the total model with the extent on the INSPIRE part. Besides modeling the data, we also modeled a procedure to exchange information between the utility networks, the NMCA, our cadastre, and excavators, and furthermore, we made a standard visualization rules and tried it out. And this is what you will see. This is the result of a test set of data. And here you see a part of a town with some utilities. Now some final remarks. For the network administrators, INSPIRE utility networks is a headache. Simple way, a headache. However, the intentions of INSPIRE are good. It would lead to an incomplete map. Here you see a map of Australia when it was first found. That's totally incomplete. An excavator cannot use that kind of map. INSPIRE is intended to be open, anonymous, and free of charge. This would lead to misuse of the information for excavators. In that sense, it would cannibalize on the Clique service. Therefore, the industry demanded that INSPIRE should be captured in the Clique service. INSPIRE as a product of Clique. However, INSPIRE gave a sense of urgency, a kick in the right direction. It persuaded some utility network operators towards web services. For an existing data set, it seems less expensive to transform it to the INSPIRE data model and publish both. That's transformation, it's not harmonization. In cases like the Clique service, with strict rules for AAA, it is more efficient to combine the national and the European model. And the mix-in multiple inheritance method helped us doing that. This is my final.
Thank you very much. Very impressive presentation and perfect in time as well.
Thank you.
So I ask the audience here, are there any questions? Then I have a question.
Yes.
Sorry. Maybe you explained it and I didn't really understand. Is this more a concept or is this something already in production and do you operate with it already, with the model?
The INSPIRE part of the Clique service, because that new product is ready and waiting for the act to be changed. And as soon as that has happened, as it went through the Parliament, we can start with this part of the new system. Nearly operable.
Okay. Anybody else now with a question? Because then I have another one. I'd like to understand, I really like this approach, you know, you have national needs,
yep.
and you see user needs, and you combine them with the infrastructure of INSPIRE, and yes. I think that's exactly what we need. Yes. That's what we're looking for, yes. So great. Now, one question I have is, you have the obligation to deliver metadata, one of the obligations, view service and things like that. Will this information then in the future come out from your central organization, or will it be done by the probably private companies who are actually operating the networks?
I don't know yet. We still have a discussion about some issues, for instance privacy and for instance security. The water distribution sector is having some trouble with INSPIRE. And this part, the publishing metadata, is also an issue.
Okay.
We have some time.
Yeah, thank you. We got 3 years' time, more or less. I mean, actually, with some stuff we should have solved it already, but okay, thank you very much. Another. Sorry. Text. For all the people who came later, I have to say again, we changed our schedule because one of the presentation was cancelled. So now we have a bit more time for the 3 presenters which are left. And the last presentation is now about BIM and INSPIRE, the marriage of 2 worlds of a better integration of built infrastructures in their environment, the MIND project, from François Robidin. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think actually it's quite a long title. I must say that this presentation has been prepared by 2 people, by Christophe Castin, who is not here today, but who is co-director of this MIND project, which is the background of my presentation. Myself, I come from the French Geological Survey, known as BRGM. And who is not aware about what is BIM? Nobody. So you are almost all experts about BIM. That's fine. So we can go faster. But anyway, just a few words about BIM, just to make sure that we are on the same line. It's a world which, for the time being, is a little bit separated from the INSPIRE world. And really the idea is to make sure that we are not losing some targets and losing some customers of INSPIRE if we are not considering the BIM. So BIM is something which has been developed for building houses and buildings, and to try to have continuity along the cycle of the building, from the conception, the design, the construction, the operation, and up to the demolition of the infrastructure of the building. And today, what we see that the BIM is more and more used for infrastructures, not only a single building, but a combination, like an airport or metro line, something like that. So huge things, or expensive things, and which are, when in the origin, the location of the building was not so important. So an architect can design a building without any kind of coordinate system, and which is definitely not the case for infrastructures. And today in France, we see, the adoption of BIM is growing very fastly, and more than 50% of the BIM projects in France are for large infrastructures and not single buildings. All this process of defining BIM standards is managed through Building Smart International, BSI, which is a kind of consortium to develop this, and with some quite processes which are well known in the development of standards. So just some examples of this kind of infrastructure. This is not only roads and bridges, but you can imagine that it can be very different things. Just a word to say that the BIM is very well on the agenda, or it's on the agenda of the Commission. And with this EU BIM task group, which has been created last year, I think, supported by and co-funded by the Commission to try to align the European approach in this area. So this is something that is developing very quickly. Obviously, it's not only for government like INSPIRE, where from the origin we are government organizations speaking with government organizations. Here we have really in the industry, which is very much involved. Just to focus on the mine project, on the French side, we have quite large companies in this domain in France. Some of them are quite successful on the global market. And there are constructors or engineering companies, and they have seen that if they are not active enough in the design of these new standards, they will be out of the market. If you are not involved and contributing to the development of the standard, you will have to adopt the standard that is developed by others. So it created some momentum in France, and we have some support from the ministry with some little money at the beginning coming from the Ministry of Environment, which is also, by the way, the Ministry of Civil Works. But they put just a little money, and most of the money for this project come from the partners. And we started with less than 40 partners, and after 2 years we are more than 60. Including a very broad scope of stakeholders, engineering companies, research, private and public research, owners of infrastructures, and so on. So this is really quite large. But obviously, the purpose is not to create something which will be only for France. It's really to make sure that we are connected with the projects and with the developments which are going around in Europe and across the world. So if we look at the objectives of MIND, progress in the modeling, it's about, let's work about the BIM for large infrastructures, but not limit to the BIM, because we know that an infrastructure is, and I come to my topic, an infrastructure is built on something, on the earth, or within the earth, like what we have heard about from the pipes and so on. And this is a very strong connection, which is not yet described by the BIM. So how to better exchange information along the life cycle of infrastructures, from the early design to the operation and maybe remediation at the end. Control the risk and so on. And if you look at that, you have to make sure most of the infrastructures have to demonstrate from the very beginning that they are dealing with the environment. Just to take an example, if you build a highway, you have to deal with the animals which were living in the place in this area, and to make sure that they have a way to cross the highway. So you have to design a bridge or a tunnel. And to do that, you first have to know which kind of biodiversity you are addressing and to monitor it and so on. So this is completely out of the classical domain for engineering companies or construction companies. So why are we here as geological survey? We are just one of the type of stakeholders who are traditionally dealing with natural environment. And this is the marriage maybe of natural environment and built environment. So we are the Geological Survey of France. There are geological surveys in all the countries and sometimes in regions. And this is just to consider that the infrastructures and the cities are not laying on a flying carpet, which sometimes could be what the people describe when they do some BIM models, where you just, and this is not the single one, most of them do not, they are flying somewhere. And actually it's quite hard to understand why. And to give examples of issues that this creates, just a paper recently published in August about the city of New York. Nobody knows what lies beneath New York City. Maybe you have some mouses and different things. But if you consider what the impact could be to ignore what happens, different things can happen. And for example, floodings could have a very severe impact. And if you are not monitoring the water, underground water, for example, which is flooding is not only coming from the sky, it also comes from the underground. So, and the cost for cities, it could be huge. So from a global point of view, the knowledge of the subsurface is critical. This is what we believe. And we try to convince people that it's true for many things. Geohazards, ground stability, subsidence, earthquake, flooding. This is, you can see every day such things happening around the world for big cities or small cities. It's also about resources for cities. Traditionally, for example, in Paris, a lot of the stones to build the buildings have been extracted from the subsurface. But it's also about water, of course, about geothermal energy, about the capacity to store energy, and so on. And it's also about pollution, and so on. So this is really when we design an infrastructure, or when you try to see how a smart city, I don't like this word, but how a city, the model of the city, the system of the city works, you definitely need to integrate these things. And this natural environment is described by geological surveys, but if you consider the biodiversity, the air, and so on, you have the agencies, environmental agencies, which are very much involved in INSPIRE. So we have to make sure that those people who are interested, or who have to use this information, are aware that a lot of information is described through INSPIRE. So just to give some examples, the tools are not completely ignoring themselves. We have done some projects these are just French examples, but they are not really, they are research projects or one-shot things, but not really daily practices. And we have seen yesterday a very nice example of the city of Berlin with a lot of information and modeling and so on. We have done the same kind of thing for different cities in France. But those models are, there you have the flying carpet and you have the models, but no connection between them. So it's not so difficult to see why it's different, because building an environment and describing natural environment is a completely different process. When you design a new infrastructure, a new building, you design it from scratch and using a CAD system. And where for geology, for example, you start from, you are ignorant, then you have some, you look at the earth if you can, or you do some drillings and you do some geophysics, and you start to understand the things. And progressively, the understanding is better, but it's never perfect, except when you have completely removed the earth at that place. For example, the data acquisition, it's very impressive to see how you can describe the elements of the environment that you can see when you move in the city. But on the contrary, to get the information from the subsurface is quite expensive, and technology is not the same. So the modeling tools are different and the standards are different. You have the BIM, and there is a connection which is CTGML, which is very much connected to INSPIRE. The aspect of accuracy and uncertainty are really crucial. We always, as geologists or people from the environment side, have difficulties to identify the accuracy of the information that we provide, and this is typically true for geology, but it's also very difficult to use, for example, for the engineers, for the engineering companies to use this uncertainty that we can provide them with. So to simplify, I should say that on one side we have engineers, and on the other side we have natural scientists. It's not completely true for me because I'm an engineer on the wrong side of the wall. So MIND, coming back to this project, we started with different use cases: roads, bridges, and example of environmental applications. This is the one I mentioned before with the bridges to have the animals crossing the highway. And I will just focus on a use case that just started during this summer. It's about the underground infrastructures. And here we have very strong support of a French organization, a public organization, which is called ANDRA. And it stands for the French Public Organization to Manage Nuclear Waste. So you may know that we do produce some nuclear waste in France. And we, for the time being, we put the waste, we try to reprocess it, but still at the end, we still have some waste concentrated. So the idea is to put it below the feet in some places. And there is a big lab, which maybe in the coming years will become a place where we will store it for not only for decades, but for centuries or 100,000 million years, I don't know. And to design this environment, the need of this organization is really to try to, if we want to, there is an obligation for them to make sure that in 100 years, the people will be able to get the information of the design of the infrastructure, of its construction, and of its operation. And not only of what has been built, but also of the environment. If there is some elements which go through the water table and so on, they have to be able to monitor it. So it's very important to try to define from the design phase a way to exchange this information, a way to share it. So this is where we are involved in that with almost 10 participants, engineers, engineering companies, constructors, ANDRA, and some research labs. The idea is not to say that we will put everything in BIM, because really the principles of the BIM standards, to make it simple, are quite different, and we do not believe that it would be wise, but at least to make sure that we are creating a connection between the BIM and the way we process and manage information, and the way it's not on this slide, but the geological model, for example, is served through INSPIRE services. So do the INSPIRE services are relevant for the BIM projects? Maybe not exactly, so we need some adjustments. So to do that, we will have to work on standards, because if you want to cooperate, if you want to develop interoperability between two worlds, you have to agree on some standards. And as I said before, we have different roles of standards. We have Building Smart and OGC. And hopefully there is already a connection between those two organizations. There is a memorandum of understanding. So the people from the BIM tried not to reinvent the way to describe the geometry and geography, and the people from OGC tried to understand from the Building Smart how to describe an infrastructure or a building. In the context of OGC, there is also, I want to mention this because I think it's relevant to see that it's happening in different areas in New York City, but this is a project which is also supported by Singapore, the city and state of Singapore, to define a better way to describe the subsurface. It's not necessarily very much connected to geology, but it has to be. So it will be maybe in the close future. So this is an action which is happening in the OGC. And we are just with our colleagues from the BGS, the British Geological Survey, Canadian, and some others around the world, pushing for OGC to more deeply work on this connection between those standards and the ones from Geoscience. So next week in Southampton, we will have the real first meeting of this new domain working group called Geoscience Domain Working Group. And why do we do that in the OGC? Because we want to make sure that the people in the OGC who work with CTGML and all that stuff are connected with us, and we are connected with them, so that when we describe and try to define the way to exchange this information, we are not creating something in isolation. So as final remarks, so I think this is quite an important thing to address for smart cities, large infrastructures. We need to be able to deliver information about forest, shallow subsurface, but in general about environment, natural environment. And I put it in red because we are in the INSPIRE conference, and I'm convinced that we need to find a solution where we do not duplicate the things, and that we can be able to derive this information from the INSPIRE data infrastructure that we are building, or we already built for part of it. And I think that this is also something which involves a lot of partners, a lot of stakeholders, and we have to be able also to be creative in the design of this public-private partnership. I was very interested in the plenary yesterday afternoon about the platforms, because I really think that there will be platforms, and if we look at the industry in this area, they are considering platforms just like BMW and the car drivers companies, the car companies. So they will build something to manage the data of the infrastructure. So if we believe that it's important that the public authorities, for example, the municipalities, keep the control of the information which is relevant for the public decisions for cities, it's important to make sure that we have, as public organizations, public services of the municipalities, we have a room and a clear role in this kind of platform. So this is not obvious, but I think there is no other way to do, because most of the data is created by private companies, paid by public money. So we have to find a way to make it virtual, to make this combination positive. And by this way, I think we will be able to really to include the natural environment and not ignore anymore this hidden or unknown part of the reality, which is really crucial for the future of our living cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think very interesting for us about something we do not talk that often in the context of INSPIRE. So it's a real future perspective. Thank you. Are there any questions in the audience? I guess lunch is waiting, but I have a question. Sorry. The question is: you were talking about the marriage of standards, as I understood. And you were mentioning INSPIRE, but if I understood right, you're looking more on the OGC standards than on the real INSPIRE standards. Do you think we need, with the BIM, with the development of BIM, do you think we need a change? We need to look on the guidance documents and the regulations and need a change of the INSPIRE documents?
I do not see an opposition between OGC and INSPIRE, but maybe this is because I'm quite involved in OGC. And why did we started with OGC? Because we believe that it's something which is globally relevant. There are a lot of initiatives in Australia, in Japan, in Korea, and if we are starting to discuss at the level of Europe, we may arrive a little bit too late. And an example of this is about railway. There is a huge initiative in China about railway. with 80 people working on that at the scale of China. And so it's important to say, okay, we are concerned about that, and we try to see what we can do. But of course, when we go as European participants to this game, we do not forget about INSPIRE and see this is our interest, not to to have two different ways and to try to reconcile it. But also at the same time, I think it's important not to work in isolation in Europe.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to do a little roundup just to bring back into memory what we had here in our very interesting session. First of all, I think from the Federal Ministry of Interior, we had a good presentation about the conflict of benefits and risks of open data, and I think a good example for an approach to deal with this from a governmental view. The second presentation, I already mentioned, that was about a digital initiative in Netherlands and the coherence to INSPIRE, combining basically national user needs, national needs together with INSPIRE. And the third one was a perspective in a future theme, BIM, basically a perspective from the underground. And I think BIM is a really innovative or a new use case for INSPIRE we will talk more about in the future. So to all the presenters, thank you very much for these good contributions to this conference, and I wish everybody a good lunch.